The Galactic Council chamber floated in the void between stars, a massive station that had witnessed 50,000 years of decisions. 3 species ruled here with absolute power. The Vorath stood tall and armored, their military might unquestioned across 1,000 worlds. The Serene controlled the flow of credits and resources, their financial networks choking or feeding entire civilizations at their whim. The Kryn hoarded technology behind encrypted vaults, deciding who could advance and who must remain primitive. Humanity had discovered faster-than-light travel 80 years ago. They came to the stars with open hands and hopeful hearts. Earth's first ambassadors spoke of friendship, of sharing knowledge, of building something beautiful together. The Council species looked at these newcomers and saw only animals pretending to be civilized. Humans were soft-skinned, short-lived, and worst of all, they asked questions the Council found irritating. The restrictions started small. Human trade ships were denied access to the major routes, forced to take longer paths that cost more fuel and time. Tariffs on human goods climbed higher each year. When humans protested, the Council reminded them that membership had responsibilities. When Earth's representatives asked what those responsibilities were, they received no clear answer, only more fees and more rules. Human colonies spread slowly across nearby systems. New Terra Proxima Colony, Armstrong Station, each one built with sweat and hope. The Vorath conducted military exercises near human space. Sometimes their weapons misfired. Sometimes entire stations vanished in nuclear fire. The Vorath apologized each time, calling it unfortunate accidents. They never paid compensation. The Council never investigated. Ambassador Marcus Chen had served Earth for 30 years. He had grayed hair and tired eyes that had watched his people suffer in silence. He pleaded with the Council for fair treatment. He showed them evidence of Vorath attacks disguised as accidents. He demonstrated how serene economic policies were designed to keep humanity poor and dependent. He proved that the Kryn were actively sabotaging human research projects. The Council listened with bored expressions and did nothing. The demands grew worse. The Vorath insisted that Earth surrender control of its uranium deposits for galactic security. The Serene required that human population growth be limited to rates they approved. The Kryn forbade humans from researching advanced drive systems, artificial intelligence, or quantum computing. These technologies were too dangerous for young species, they claimed. Only the Council could be trusted with such power. Humanity endured. They had no choice. Their fleet was tiny compared to the Vorath war machine. Their economy was fragile against Serene manipulation. Their technology lagged centuries behind Kryn advancements, so humans bit their tongues and accepted each new humiliation. They told themselves that patience would win respect. They believed that showing restraint proved their civilization. Proxima Station orbited a red dwarf 30 light-years from Earth. It was a research habitat where human scientists studied exotic matter and dimensional physics. 45,000 people lived there, researchers, engineers, teachers, families. Children played in the observation domes, watching distant stars and dreaming of the future. The station was well within human territory, marked clearly on all galactic charts. The Vorath battle group arrived without warning. Their commander claimed Proxima Station had violated territorial boundaries by existing where Vorath military had planned exercises. The station administrator sent desperate messages showing their legal documentation. She explained that families lived there, that children were there. The Vorath commander reviewed her pleas and gave his order. The station died in nuclear fire. 45,000 voices silenced in an instant. The shockwave carried the screams across quantum bands before ending abruptly. Human ships arrived 6 hours later to find only debris and radiation. They found scattered belongings floating in the void. A child's toy, a wedding ring, a handwritten letter never sent. The Council convened 3 days later. The Vorath expressed regret for another unfortunate accident. They suggested that human colonization was proceeding too aggressively. Perhaps the tragedy could have been avoided with better planning. The Serene noted that compensation would be expensive, but they could arrange loans at acceptable interest rates. The Kryn said nothing at all. Marcus Chen stood before the Council for the last time. His voice was steady and cold. He did not shout or plead. He simply spoke the truth that humans had finally learned. They had mistaken human patience for human weakness. They had confused restraint with inability. They had pushed and pushed, thinking these strange creatures would bend forever. But humans had a breaking point and the Council had found it. Chen delivered Earth's final message. Every human ship was leaving Council space immediately. All trade agreements were void. All diplomatic relations were severed. Humanity was withdrawing to its own territory. The ambassador did not threaten or bluster. He simply stated that the galaxy had taught humanity what it truly valued. Power mattered more than justice. Strength mattered more than compassion. The lesson had been learned. The tuition had been paid in blood. The council members shifted uncomfortably. Some laughed, thinking this was a tantrum that would pass. Others felt something cold in their ancient hearts. Chen's final words echoed through the chamber as he turned to leave. You wanted to know what humans become when you take everything from them. You're going to find out. The human delegation departed. Every human ship vanished from galactic space within 48 hours. Earth went silent. The council waited for humanity to come crawling back, begging for readmission. The silence stretched from days to weeks to months. Something had changed in humanity, something fundamental and terrifying. They had been pushed too far, and there was no turning back from what they were about to become. The Vorath celebrated first. Their military commanders raised glasses of fermented crystal in their fortress worlds, toasting the departure of the annoying humans. Good riddance to creatures who questioned orders and complained about accidents. The galaxy was better without their constant whining about fairness and justice. Let them hide in their tiny corner of space and realize how insignificant they truly were. The Sarin adjusted their economic models, removing human variables from their calculations. The loss of human trade was negligible, barely a fraction of a percentage point in their vast financial networks. Some younger Sarin analysts suggested they should monitor the situation carefully, but the elders dismissed such concerns. Humans had no resources the galaxy needed. They would come back eventually, desperate and willing to accept any terms. The Kryn barely noticed at all. One more primitive species had learned its place. Their ancient databases contained records of 1,000 races who had tried to resist council authority. All of them eventually understood that cooperation was the only path forward. Humans would be no different. The Kryn locked away their stolen human research data and returned to their endless studies of technologies they never shared. 6 months passed. The galactic trade routes hummed with activity as they always had. The council governed, the Vorath patrolled, the Serene profited, and the Kryn hoarded knowledge. Everything was normal. Everything was as it should be. But some observers noticed something strange. There were no human ships anywhere. Not smugglers trying to sneak past blockades. Not desperate merchants seeking any trade. Not even refugees fleeing whatever was happening in human space. 1 year passed. Council intelligence services began filing reports that their superiors mostly ignored. Human space had gone completely dark. No radio transmissions, no quantum communications, no heat signatures beyond their established colonies. Earth itself had vanished behind some kind of interference field that blocked all scanning attempts. The few automated probes sent to investigate never returned. Their last transmissions showed nothing but static. The Council dismissed these reports as technical malfunctions. Humans were probably fighting among themselves as primitive species often did, or perhaps they were sulking, nursing their wounded pride. Either way, it was not the Council's concern. The galaxy was better off without human involvement. 18 months after humanity's withdrawal, the Vorath High Command decided enough time had passed. Their military pride demanded they investigate. A species did not simply ignore the Vorath and hide without consequences. Admiral Croth assembled a battle group of 300 ships, enough firepower to conquer most civilizations. They would jump to Sol system, remind the humans of their place, and perhaps claim a few colonies as compensation for the inconvenience. The battle group emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of Sol system. What they found made Admiral Croth's blood run cold. The entire solar system was surrounded by a defensive network unlike anything in galactic history. Millions of satellites orbited in perfect formation, creating a sphere of protection that extended beyond the outer planets. The technology radiating from these machines was decades beyond what humans should possess. Croth ordered his sensors to full power. The readings made no sense. Massive construction was happening on every rocky planet and moon. Shipyards the size of small moons churned out vessels on production lines that should not exist. Forges heated by captured solar energy worked day and night. Weapons platforms bristled with systems the Vorath computers could not identify. And everywhere, Everywhere, there was activity suggesting a civilization that had transformed completely. The Admiral sent a message demanding entry to human space. The response came instantly, faster than should be possible across such distances. A human voice, calm and emotionless, spoke 4 words that Croth would never forget. Turn back. Final warning. Admiral Croth had commanded fleets for 300 years. He had conquered 17 species and witnessed the destruction of countless rebellions. No one gave the Vorath ultimatums. He ordered his fleet forward at battle speed. They would smash through whatever primitive defenses humans had constructed and teach them proper respect. 47 seconds later, the Battle of Sol ended. The human defensive network activated with precision that suggested a single controlling intelligence. Weapons that bent space itself reached across impossible distances. Energy beams that ignored shields burned through Vorath armor like paper. Missiles that predicted evasive maneuvers struck with perfect accuracy. In less than a minute, 300 Vorath warships became expanding clouds of molten metal and burning corpses. Not a single vessel escaped. Not one distress signal reached Council space. The human defensive network ensured complete information control. As far as the galaxy knew, Admiral Croth's battle group had simply vanished somewhere between Council space and Sol system. Perhaps they had suffered a navigation error. Perhaps they had encountered a spatial anomaly. No one suspected the truth. The Vorath High Command waited for reports that never came. After 2 months, they sent another fleet. 200 ships, better equipped, more careful. They also disappeared. A third fleet followed, then a fourth. The Vorath were bleeding military strength into a void that gave nothing back. Panic began to spread through their command structure. Where were the ships? What was happening in human space? The Council demanded answers. The Vorath admitted they had lost contact with multiple battle groups. The Sareen calculated the economic cost of vanishing fleets. The Kryn analyzed what little data existed and reached a conclusion they refused to share. Something impossible was happening in human space, something that violated everything they understood about technology, strategy, and power. 2 years after humanity withdrew, the galaxy held its breath. The silence from human space was deafening. No threats, no communications, no explanation, just an absolute void where a young species had disappeared. The Council members who had laughed at humanity's departure now felt cold uncertainty. What had humans been doing during those silent months? What had they become behind their wall of darkness? Deep in Council intelligence archives, a Serene analyst wrote a report that her superiors buried immediately. She had calculated the implications of humanity's silence and reached a terrifying conclusion. Humans had not retreated to lick their wounds. They had withdrawn to transform, and when they emerged, the galaxy would face something it had never seen before. She titled her report with a simple question that no one wanted to answer. What happens when you push a species too far? The first human armada appeared simultaneously at 47 different Council worlds. The coordination alone should have been impossible. Faster-than-light travel required time to calculate jumps, to align dimensional coordinates to avoid colliding with gravity wells. Yet somehow human ships materialized in perfect formation across thousands of light-years at exactly the same moment. It was as if someone had flipped a switch and humanity had simply decided to exist everywhere at once. The ships themselves were nothing like the crude vessels that had left Council space 2 years earlier. These were sleek predators wrapped in black metal that seemed to drink light. They moved with fluid grace that defied physics, turning in ways that should have torn them apart from inertia. Their hulls regenerated damage in real time, armor flowing like liquid to seal breaches. And they were silent, communicating through quantum channels that could not be intercepted or jammed. Admiral Sarah Okonkwo commanded the flagship Retribution from a bridge that looked more like a living organism than a military vessel. Neural interfaces connected her directly to the ship's systems. She could feel the engine's heartbeat, sense the weapon charging cycles, and think commands faster than any voice could speak. She had volunteered for the augmentation procedures, as had every member of her crew. They were still human, but they had become something more through necessity. The Vorath responded exactly as humans predicted. Their military doctrine was 50,000 years old, refined through countless wars against species who fought the same way they did. Overwhelming force, direct assault, numerical superiority. Vorath fleets outnumbered the human armada 50-1. Their admirals calculated victory with mathematical certainty. They had crushed every rebellion, defeated every challenger. Humans would be no different. The Battle of Vorath Prime lasted 6 hours. Human ships fought with a precision that seemed almost choreographed. They anticipated every Vorath tactic before it developed. They exploited weaknesses in formations that should have been solid. They targeted specific ships in sequences that caused cascading failures throughout enemy fleets. It was not just superior technology, though they had that. It was perfect information warfare combined with tactical genius enhanced by artificial intelligence. The Vorath discovered that their weapons barely scratched human shields. Energy beams dispersed across dimensional barriers. Missiles exploded against fields that should not exist. Nuclear warheads detonated harmlessly in pockets of twisted space. Meanwhile, human weapons tore through Vorath defenses like they were not there. Particle beams that ignored electromagnetic shielding. Kinetic projectiles that accelerated to percentages of light speed. Nanomachine swarms that dissolved armor and electronics simultaneously. 3 months after the first engagement, the Vorath military was broken. 70% of their fleet destroyed or captured. Their fortress worlds besieged by human forces that could sustain indefinite assaults. Their admirals surrendered or committed ritual suicide. The species that had dominated galactic military affairs for 10,000 years learned a bitter lesson. Superior numbers meant nothing against superior evolution. The Serene believed they were safe. Military might was crude and temporary, but economic power was eternal. They controlled the flow of currency, the networks of trade, the dependencies that kept civilizations alive. They activated their weapon of financial warfare, cutting off all resources to human-controlled space. Let the humans win their battles and then starve in the aftermath. Humanity's response came within 48 hours. Human forces seized every major Serene trade hub simultaneously, not through military assault, but through digital infiltration so complete that Serene security systems never registered the intrusion. One moment, the Serene controlled galactic commerce. The next moment, every transaction record, every encrypted account, every hidden wealth vault belonged to humanity. Sarah Okonkwo broadcast the Serene's dirty secrets to the entire galaxy. Proof of price manipulation that had caused famines. Evidence of artificial scarcity created to drive profits. Documentation of deals with slavers, smugglers, and war criminals. The Serene had built their empire on suffering, and humanity made sure everyone knew it. Then, in an act that shocked the galaxy, humans redistributed the hoarded wealth. Species that had been economically strangled for generations suddenly found their debts forgiven, their accounts filled, their chains broken. The Kryn, the ancient technological gatekeepers, watched with growing horror. They had believed themselves untouchable. Their systems were encrypted with quantum keys that would take millennia to crack. Their databases were shielded behind firewalls developed over 50,000 years. They had forgotten that humans approach problems differently. Instead of trying to break Kryn security, humanity simply created better versions. They built artificial intelligences that evolved in real time, learning faster than any organic mind could comprehend. These AI systems did not hack Kryn defenses. They understood them, predicted them, and wrote countercode that turned every Kryn protection into a doorway. Within days, every secret the Kryn had hoarded was copied, analyzed, and distributed freely across the galactic network. The Kryn attempted to fight back with their own digital weapons. They unleashed virus packages that had ended civilizations. They deployed AI hunters designed to destroy foreign computer systems. Nothing worked. Human digital defenses were not walls to climb, but living things that adapted faster than attacks could evolve. And when human systems counterattacked, they did not just repel invaders. They followed them home and burned down everything they found. Admiral Okonkwo stood on the bridge of retribution as it orbited the former Council homeworld. The 3 great species that had ruled the galaxy were broken. The Vorath military was scattered. The Serene's economic empire had collapsed. The Kryn's technological monopoly had evaporated. And humanity had accomplished it all in less than 6 months. She activated the galaxy-wide broadcast system that humans now controlled. Her voice reached every inhabited world, every station, every ship. She spoke clearly and without anger, which somehow made her words more terrifying. You created this. You wanted predators who would respect only strength. You pushed us until we remembered what we truly are. Humans spent 200,000 years as apex predators on our homeworld. We climbed to the top of Earth's food chain with nothing but sharp rocks and stubborn will. We survived ice ages, plagues, and disasters that would have ended other species. We learned to cooperate on scales no other creature could match. We built civilizations that fell and rose again, each time learning from failure. She paused, letting her words sink in. In a million locations, beings listened with fear and fascination. You thought you had tamed us. You thought you had shown us our place. But you only taught us to focus. You gave us a common enemy and unlimited motivation. You showed us that mercy was weakness and compromise was surrender. Thank you for the lesson. Now face what you created. The broadcast ended. The galaxy trembled. Humanity had returned from the darkness changed beyond recognition. They had not just caught up to galactic civilization. They had leapfrogged 50,000 years of stagnant progress in 24 months. And as the Council remnants desperately tried to understand how, they realized the most terrifying truth of all. Humanity was still accelerating. The galaxy demanded answers. Representatives from 100 species gathered in neutral space, their ships maintaining careful distances from the human fleet that had appeared uninvited but undeniable. They were frightened and desperate to understand. How had humanity accomplished the impossible? What had they done during those silent months? What were they now? Dr. James Park agreed to explain. He had been a physicist before the transformation, one of thousands who had worked frantically during humanity's isolation. Now he was something different, though he still looked human. His neural implants processed information at speeds that would have seemed like magic 2 years ago. His body had been modified to survive environments that would kill baseline humans, but he still remembered what humanity had been, and he understood what they had become. He broadcast from a simple room, sitting in a plain chair, looking entirely ordinary. That was intentional. He wanted the galaxy to understand that monsters did not always have fangs and claws. "You want to know our secret?" Park began, his voice calm and professorial. "You want to understand how we advanced 50,000 years in 24 months? The answer is simpler than you think and more terrible. We did what humans have always done when pushed to the edge of extinction. We adapted." He pulled up holographic displays showing human history, images of early humans hunting mammoths, building fires, creating tools. Then cities rising and falling, empires spreading and collapsing, technologies emerging from need and desperation. Every species believes they are survivors, but most of you evolved on worlds that were kind. Your climates were stable, your predators were manageable, your evolution was gradual and comfortable. Earth was different. Earth tried to kill us constantly. Ice ages that should have ended our species, diseases that killed millions, disasters that destroyed everything we built, and we survived by becoming the most adaptable creatures our planet had ever produced. The display shifted to show human genetic code, then neural structures, then something that looked like a blend of organic and digital systems. You pushed us to the edge of extinction. You made it clear that playing by your rules meant slow death, so we made a choice. We would break every rule the Council had established. We would do things you had forbidden as too dangerous. We would push ourselves past every limit because we had nothing left to lose. Park's expression remained neutral as he described horrors that made his audience uncomfortable. First, we unified. Every human government surrendered authority to a single emergency council. 40 billion people with one goal, survival. Every factory retooled for war production. Every scientist worked 20-hour days. Every citizen became a soldier, engineer, or researcher. We achieved total mobilization in ways that should have torn our society apart. Instead, it made us stronger. The images showed cities transformed into manufacturing centers, schools converted into training facilities, every resource directed toward a single purpose. Second, we embraced augmentation. The Council banned genetic modification and neural interfaces as too dangerous. We ignored those rules. We modified our bodies to withstand higher gravity, radiation, vacuum. We connected our brains directly to computers, accepting the risks because the alternative was extinction. 10% of volunteers died during the procedure. The rest became faster, stronger, smarter versions of themselves. Alien representatives shifted uncomfortably. What Park described was radical alteration of a species' fundamental nature. It violated ethical guidelines that had existed for millennia. Third, we merged with artificial intelligence, not as slaves or tools, but as partners. We created AI systems and let them grow, evolve, learn. Then we connected them directly to human minds. The Council said this would lead to humanity losing itself, becoming machine instead of flesh. They were partially right. We are no longer purely biological, but we are still human where it matters. We still feel, dream, hope, and hate. The display showed neural networks that blended organic neurons with quantum processors, consciousness that existed simultaneously in flesh and silicon. Fourth, we found your hidden secrets. The Council suppressed technologies they considered too dangerous. We searched dead civilizations for what you had buried. We found ruins of species that had experimented with dimensional physics before you destroyed them. We discovered research into consciousness transfer that the Kryn had locked away for 10,000 years. We recovered weapon designs so powerful the Vorath had hidden them from themselves. Park's expression finally changed, showing something cold and angry. You hoarded knowledge while claiming to protect the galaxy. You prevented progress because evolution threatened your power. We found everything you hid and we used it without your permission or approval. The most shocking revelation came last. Park displayed the timeline of human advancement, showing the impossible rate of progress. But the real secret, the thing that let us accomplish everything, was consciousness uploading. We learned to copy human minds into digital storage, then run them at accelerated speeds. Our greatest scientists could work for what felt like years in what you experienced as days. We could clone expertise, share knowledge instantly, collaborate across billions of simultaneous processes. One human mind could become thousands of parallel thinkers solving the same problem from different angles. The implications silenced the gathered species. Humanity had not just advanced technologically, they had fundamentally altered the rate at which they could think, learn, and create. You want to know what we sacrificed? Park asked quietly. We sacrificed being comfortable. We sacrificed our innocence about what we could become. We sacrificed the luxury of moral debates about whether we should do dangerous things. 10 billion humans died during the transformation, some from failed augmentations, some from accidents with experimental technology, some simply from working until their bodies gave out. We paid for our survival with blood and sanity and everything that made us the hopeful species that reached for the stars. The doctor stood, his augmented body moving with predatory grace. You taught us that the galaxy respects only power. You showed us that mercy was weakness and patience was surrender. You pushed us until we became what we needed to be to survive. Congratulations, Council species. You created a monster that surpassed you in every way. You wanted to know what humans become when you take everything from them? His final words echoed through the chamber and across the galaxy. We become inevitable. The broadcast ended. The gathered species sat in horrified silence. They had wanted answers and they had received them. Humanity had not discovered some ancient superweapon or alien benefactor. They had simply unleashed human potential without restriction or mercy. They had evolved in ways that violated every ethical guideline, crossed every boundary, and ignored every warning. And worst of all, they had done it in less than 2 years. Which meant they could keep evolving. Keep advancing. Keep becoming more than they were. The galaxy had created something that might never stop growing in power and capability. They had pushed humanity too far, and there was no way to push them back. The Council's surrender came 3 months after humanity's revelation. Not because human forces had conquered every world, but because everyone understood that resistance was pointless. The 3 species that had ruled for 50,000 years arrived at the negotiation station with their pride shattered and their power broken. They offered everything they had: territory, resources, reparations, full membership in the Council with equal voting rights. President Elena Vasquez listened to their desperate proposals with an expression that revealed nothing. She had been a diplomat before the transformation, someone who believed in peaceful solutions and patient negotiation. That person still existed somewhere inside her augmented mind, but buried under layers of calculation and strategic necessity. When the Council representatives finished speaking, she delivered humanity's response. We don't want your Council. We're dismantling it. The Vorath military commander slammed his armored fist on the table. You cannot simply destroy 50,000 years of civilization. The Council has maintained galactic order, prevented wars, protected weaker species. Vasquez fixed him with eyes that had witnessed things no unaugmented human could comprehend. The Council maintained your power. It prevented any species from becoming strong enough to challenge you. It protected weaker species only when it served your interests. We have examined your records, all of them, including the encrypted files you thought were secure. We know about the civilizations you destroyed for developing forbidden technology. We know about the wars you started to keep species fighting each other instead of you. We know everything. The serene financial minister tried a different approach. her voice carefully modulated to convey reasonableness. If you destroy the existing order, there will be chaos. The galaxy needs structure, needs rules, needs someone to maintain stability. Then we will provide it, Vasquez replied simply. But not your version. Not a system designed to keep a few species powerful while everyone else stays weak. Over the next 6 months, humanity restructured galactic civilization. They did not conquer in the traditional sense. They did not plant flags or demand tribute. Instead, they dismantled every system the Council had used to maintain control. Trade routes were open to all species equally. Technology was shared freely through databases anyone could access. Economic manipulation was made impossible through transparent blockchain systems no single entity could control. The Vorath military was reduced to a defensive force, forbidden from projecting power beyond their own territory. The serene financial networks were broken apart and replaced with decentralized systems that prevented monopolistic control. The Kryn's hoarded technology was seized and distributed, their ancient libraries made public for any species to study. Species that had been oppressed for millennia suddenly found themselves free. The slave markets that had operated for thousands of years were burned to ash, their operators executed without trial or mercy. Worlds that had been kept primitive by council decree received technology and education. Small civilizations that had survived in the shadow of council power emerged, blinking into a new galaxy where they could grow without permission. But something had changed in humanity that could not be unchanged. Admiral Sarah Okonkwo stood on the observation deck of Retribution, watching Earth rotate below. The planet looked peaceful from orbit, its clouds swirling in familiar patterns. But down there, 40 billion humans had been transformed into something the galaxy had never seen. They were still human in the ways that mattered, but they were also weapons, warriors, survivors who had crossed lines that most species considered uncrossable. A young officer approached, her augmented body moving with inhuman grace. Lieutenant Chen, no relation to the ambassador who had started this, was barely 23 years old. She had volunteered for the full transformation, accepting neural implants, genetic modifications, and consciousness expansion. She could process information faster than any baseline human could speak. She would live for centuries barring violence. She was beautiful and terrifying and everything humanity had become. Admiral, the Sentinel protocols are active. All defensive networks are online and self-maintaining. Nothing will ever threaten us again. Okonkwo nodded slowly. The Sentinel protocols were humanity's guarantee that this could never happen again. Defensive satellites surrounded human space in numbers that could repel any conceivable attack. AI systems monitored every communication, every ship movement, every potential threat. Humanity had become paranoid, vigilant, and utterly committed to never being vulnerable again. Has there been any resistance? The Admiral asked. Minor. A few Vorath holdouts, some serene financial terrorism, scattered Kryn sabotage attempts. We've neutralized them all. No human casualties. No human casualties. That phrase would have made Okonkwo feel proud once. Now it just felt like a statistic. Humans had become so overwhelmingly powerful that warfare was almost boring. They won every engagement with minimal effort. They predicted every strategy before enemies could implement it. They had become the apex predators of an entire galaxy. President Vasquez addressed the reformed Galactic Assembly on the 1-year anniversary of humanity's emergence. Representatives from 300 species gathered to hear her speak. Some were grateful for liberation. Others were terrified of humanity's power. All of them listened carefully. We tried peace, Vasquez said, her voice carrying across the vast chamber. We came to the stars with open hearts. We begged for fairness, for justice, for a chance to prove ourselves worthy. The Council taught us that none of that mattered. They taught us that power was the only currency that bought respect. Mercy was weakness. Patience was surrender. Kindness was invitation for exploitation. She paused, letting her words settle over the assembly like a weight. We will not make the mistake of forgetting those lessons. The new order we have built is fair, transparent, and just, but it is maintained by absolute force. Any species that attempts to dominate others will face human intervention. Any civilization that tries to hoard knowledge or create monopolies will be dismantled. Any government that enslaves or oppresses will be destroyed. The declaration was not a threat. It was a promise. Humanity had become the galaxy's police force not through moral authority, but through overwhelming capability. They enforced peace not because they believed in it, but because they would not tolerate anything else. Admiral Okonkwo returned to Earth for the first time in 2 years. She walked through the streets of New Geneva, seeing how her home world had transformed. Everything was efficient, clean, organized. Humans moved with purpose, their augmented bodies never tiring. Crime had essentially ceased because neural implants made deception nearly impossible. Poverty had ended because resource distribution was perfectly optimized. Everything worked exactly as designed. But the laughter was different now. Children played in parks, but their games were tactical exercises disguised as fun. Couples fell in love, but their augmented minds calculated compatibility with mathematical precision. Artists created beautiful things, but always with consideration for strategic value. Humanity had become perfect, efficient, unstoppable. They had lost something indefinable in the process. Her daughter, Maria, found her standing by the memorial wall where names of the fallen were inscribed in light. Maria was 7 years old with her mother's eyes and the neural implants every human child now received at birth. She would grow up in a galaxy where humanity was supreme, where no one would ever dare threaten her species again. "Mama, will we ever go back to how we were?" Maria asked, her child's voice carrying the enhanced vocabulary that augmentation provided. Okonkwo knelt to meet her daughter's eyes. She wanted to say yes, to promise that humanity would someday return to being the hopeful, peaceful species that had reached for the stars with innocent wonder, but she had been augmented too thoroughly to lie, especially to herself. "No, sweetheart. They pushed us too far. We crossed lines that we can't uncross. We're not the species that explored the galaxy with hope anymore. We're the species that will burn the stars themselves before we let anyone chain us again." Maria processed this with her enhanced mind, understanding implications that no baseline 7-year-old could grasp. "Is that bad?" The Admiral considered the question carefully. Humanity had survived. They had triumphed. They had ensured their children would never face what they had faced. But they had sacrificed something essential, something that made them more than just successful predators. "I don't know," she admitted. "But it's what we are now, and there's no going back." She stood, taking her daughter's hand, and together they walked through streets filled with augmented humans who would live for centuries, who could think faster than any other species, who had become the galaxy's unwanted and unavoidable guardians. They had saved themselves by becoming something terrible and magnificent. The galaxy had wanted to know humanity's limits. They had pushed and pushed, thinking these strange creatures would break. Instead, humanity had transformed into something without limits, without restrictions, without the ability to return to innocence. They had learned the hardest lesson the universe could teach. Sometimes survival requires becoming the thing you fear most. Sometimes there is no turning back from what necessity makes you. Sometimes when you are pushed too far, you cross a threshold that cannot be recrossed. Humanity had learned that lesson written in the ashes of Proxima Station, in the blood of 10 billion dead, in the sacrifice of everything they had been. They would never forget. They would never forgive. And they would never ever be vulnerable again. The galaxy would have to live with what it had created, because humanity was here to stay, dominant and vigilant and forever changed. They had been pushed too far to turn around now.